You're here because something inside you knows you're being held back. Not by circumstances, not by lack of opportunity, not by external forces beyond your control, but by something far more insidious. Something that's been camouflaged as support, disguised as love, masked as concern for your well-being. Right now, as these words land in your consciousness, your nervous system is responding to a frequency it recognizes, a truth that's been whispering to you in quiet moments, in the space between sleep and waking, in those brief instances when the noise of daily life falls away and clarity emerges like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. You've felt it, haven't you? That subtle but persistent drain on your energy, that inexplicable heaviness that settles over you after certain conversations, the way your dreams feel smaller after spending time with specific people, the curious phenomenon where your enthusiasm dims, your vision clouds, and your inner fire reduces to barely glowing embers whenever you're in certain company. This isn't coincidence. This isn't your imagination playing tricks on you. This is energetic warfare being waged against your expansion, and most of the perpetrators don't even realize they're doing it. They believe they're helping you. They're convinced they're protecting you from disappointment, keeping you grounded, saving you from making terrible mistakes. But here's what they don't understand, what they've forgotten or perhaps never knew. Your soul didn't incarnate into this lifetime to play it safe. You didn't choose this human experience to settle for mediocrity, to dim your light so others feel comfortable, or to abandon your dreams because someone else couldn't achieve theirs. The people I'm about to reveal to you, these spiritual saboteurs, they operate from a frequency of limitation. Not because they're evil or malicious, but because they've accepted ceilings that were never meant to exist. They've internalized beliefs about what's possible that are so restrictive, so suffocating, that they unconsciously transmit these limitations to everyone in their energetic field. And if you're watching this right now, if something deep within you is saying yes to these words, then you've been receiving these transmissions. You've been absorbing these frequency patterns that contradict everything your soul knows to be true about your potential, your purpose, your power to create extraordinary realities. There are 5 distinct types of spiritual saboteurs that will keep you trapped in cycles of mediocrity if you allow them continued access to your energy field. 5 archetypes that masquerade as allies, while systematically dismantling your connection to your authentic power. 5 patterns of relationship that drain your life force, while convincing you they're necessary for your survival. Before we dive into each type, I need you to understand something crucial. This isn't about judgment. This isn't about making anyone wrong or bad. These individuals are operating from their own wounds, their own fears, their own unhealed trauma responses. They're doing what they believe is best based on their current level of consciousness. But here's the truth that will liberate you from guilt and obligation. Your spiritual evolution, your expansion into higher frequencies of possibility, your alignment with your soul's purpose, these are not negotiable. They're not up for debate. They're not subject to other people's approval or understanding. You have a sacred responsibility to protect your energy, to guard your dreams, to maintain your connection to the infinite field of possibility that exists beyond the limited perspectives of those who've forgotten their own divine nature. This isn't selfish. This is survival. This is how consciousness evolves, how new realities are born, how the impossible becomes inevitable. The first type of spiritual saboteur is what I call the reality checker. On the surface, they appear to be the voice of reason, the practical friend who keeps your feet on the ground. They use phrases like, "Let's be realistic here. That's not how the world works," and "I'm just trying to protect you from disappointment." The reality checker has made peace with limitation. They've accepted that life is hard, that good things don't happen to people like them, that dreams are for other people who have advantages they lack. And because they've organized their entire identity around these beliefs, your expansion threatens their worldview at the most fundamental level. When you share your vision with a reality checker, they immediately begin calculating all the ways it could fail. Not because they're trying to hurt you, but because their nervous system literally cannot compute possibilities that exist beyond their accepted parameters of what's achievable. Their brain has been conditioned to see obstacles, to anticipate problems, to focus on everything that could go wrong. They'll remind you of your past failures, your current limitations, your lack of resources or connections or experience. They'll point out market conditions, economic factors, statistical probabilities. They'll cite examples of other people who tried similar things and failed. All of this feels like helpful information, practical guidance from someone who cares about you. But what's really happening is frequency contamination. Every time they speak these limitations over your dreams, every time they redirect your attention from possibility to probability, from vision to circumstance, they're pulling your consciousness down into the density of their accepted reality. They're inviting you to vibrate at the frequency of their resignation. The reality checker doesn't understand that consciousness creates reality, not the other way around. They believe external circumstances determine internal experience, that the physical world is fixed and immutable, that working within existing systems is the only sensible approach to life. They've forgotten that every breakthrough in human history came from someone who refused to accept current limitations as permanent fixtures. They'll tell you to have a backup plan, to keep your day job, to wait until conditions are perfect before making any moves. They'll encourage you to think smaller, aim lower, be more reasonable in your expectations. And if you listen to them long enough, if you allow their frequency to become your frequency, you'll find yourself accepting their limited version of what's possible. The second type is the misery lover. This person has become so identified with struggle, pain, and difficulty that they literally cannot function without drama in their life. They've confused intensity with aliveness, chaos with excitement, problems with purpose. Their entire sense of self is built around being the victim, the survivor, the one who's endured more than anyone else. The misery lover will initially be attracted to your expansion because it represents hope, possibility, a chance to escape their current circumstances. But as you begin to embody higher frequencies, as your life starts flowing with more ease and synchronicity, as joy becomes your natural state, rather than something you have to fight for, they become deeply uncomfortable. Your peace threatens their identity. Your abundance challenges their story about how hard life has to be. Your joy makes them question whether their suffering is actually necessary, or if it's become an addiction they're not ready to release. So they begin to sabotage, often unconsciously. They'll call you with crisis after crisis, emergency after emergency, always needing your energy, your attention, your emotional resources to help them navigate whatever disaster they've created or attracted. They'll make you feel guilty for being happy when they're struggling, selfish for focusing on your growth when they need support. They operate from what I call the suffering Olympics, where every conversation becomes a competition to see who has it worse, who's dealing with more challenges, who deserves more sympathy. They'll minimize your problems because they're not as severe as theirs, and they'll dismiss your successes because you haven't suffered enough to truly appreciate them. The misery lover doesn't want solutions, they want sympathy. They don't want to heal, they want witnesses to their pain. They're addicted to the attention that comes from being broken, the special treatment that comes from being fragile, the sense of importance that comes from always being in crisis. If you try to help them see possibilities beyond their current situation, they'll explain why nothing will work, why their case is different, why the same principles that work for everyone else won't work for them. They've become so comfortable in their cage of limitation that freedom feels foreign and frightening. The third type of spiritual saboteur is the energy vampire. This person has never learned to generate their own life force, their own sense of purpose, and own enthusiasm direction. Instead, they've developed sophisticated methods for extracting these qualities from others, particularly from those who shine brightly. Energy vampires are masters of manipulation through emotional need. They'll make you feel special, chosen, essential to their well-being. They'll tell you that you're the only one who understands them, the only one who can help them, the only one who truly sees their potential. This feels good initially because it feeds your need to be needed, your desire to make a difference, your natural instinct to help others grow. But over time, you begin to notice a pattern. Every interaction leaves you feeling drained. Conversations that start with you feeling vibrant and energized end with you feeling depleted and heavy. You find yourself constantly giving advice, offering support, providing solutions that are never implemented. You become their unpaid therapist, their emotional crutch, their source of stability in an otherwise chaotic existence. The energy vampire doesn't want to become self-sufficient because that would require taking responsibility for their own emotional state, their own choices, their own results. It's easier to remain dependent on your energy, your insights, your emotional labor, than to do the difficult work of developing their own inner resources. They'll create manufactured emergencies to pull you back into their orbit whenever you start to distance yourself. They'll have mysterious illnesses, sudden crises, urgent situations that require your immediate attention and support. They'll make you feel guilty for having boundaries, selfish for protecting your energy, heartless for prioritizing your own growth over their needs. What makes this particularly insidious is that energy vampires often present themselves as spiritual seekers, as people on a path of growth and awakening. They'll use spiritual language, attend workshops and ceremonies, collect teachers and modalities like trophies. But they never actually transform, because transformation would mean losing access to the external energy sources they've become addicted to. The fourth type is what I call the comfort zone guardian. This person has appointed themselves the protector of your current reality, the defender of your existing circumstances, the guardian of your familiar patterns and predictable routines. They genuinely believe they're looking out for your best interests by discouraging any movement beyond what's known and tested. The comfort zone guardian operates from deep fear of change, not just for themselves, but for everyone in their circle. They've created a sense of safety and identity around maintaining the status quo, around keeping everything exactly as it is. Your desire to expand, to explore, to risk everything for the possibility of something greater triggers their most primal survival fears. They'll remind you of everything you have to lose if you pursue your dreams. Your stable income, your secure relationships, your predictable lifestyle, your social status, your family's approval. They'll paint vivid pictures of worst-case scenarios, of what could happen if you leave the safety of known territory for the uncertainty of uncharted waters. What makes the comfort zone guardian particularly challenging to recognize is that their concerns often sound reasonable, even loving. They'll say things like, "I just don't want to see you get hurt," or "You've worked so hard to get where you are. Why would you risk throwing it all away?" So they position themselves as the wise elder, the experienced voice, the one who's seen what happens when people get too ambitious, too confident, too willing to rock the boat. But beneath their protective exterior lies a deeper truth. The comfort zone guardian is terrified of being left behind. Your expansion means they'll have to confront their own stagnation, their own unfulfilled dreams, their own choices to settle for less than what their soul was calling them toward. Your courage to leap into the unknown forces them to face their own cowardice in remaining trapped in situations that no longer serve them. They'll subtly undermine your confidence by questioning your judgment, your timing, your readiness. They'll point out every small mistake as evidence that you're not cut out for bigger things. They'll celebrate your minor successes while expressing concern about your larger ambitions, creating a psychological ceiling that keeps you playing small enough to remain within their comfort zone. The comfort zone. Guardian doesn't realize that true security comes from developing faith in your ability to navigate uncertainty, not from clinging to external structures that create an illusion of safety. They've confused familiarity with security, routine with stability, predictability with peace. They don't understand that the universe supports those who align with their authentic path, even when that path leads through unknown territory. The fifth and most dangerous type of spiritual saboteur is the false teacher. This person presents themselves as more evolved, more awakened, more spiritually advanced than they actually are. They position themselves as your guide, your mentor, your gateway to higher consciousness. They speak the language of transformation while keeping you dependent on their interpretation of truth. False teachers are masters of spiritual bypassing. They'll encourage you to transcend your desires rather than fulfill them, to surrender your dreams rather than manifest them, to accept limitation as a spiritual practice rather than recognize it as a betrayal of your divine nature. They preach detachment from outcomes while remaining deeply attached to maintaining their position of authority over your spiritual development. They'll tell you that wanting success, abundance, recognition, or material comfort is unspiritual, that true enlightenment requires giving up worldly ambitions. They'll convince you that struggle is necessary for growth, that suffering builds character, that the more difficult the path, the more spiritual it must be. They twist ancient wisdom to serve their own need to keep you small, controllable, and dependent on their guidance. What makes false teachers particularly insidious is that they often possess genuine spiritual knowledge and may have had authentic awakening experiences, but somewhere along their journey, they became more invested in being seen as enlightened than in actually embodying enlightenment. They confused having insights with being transformed, knowing spiritual concepts with living spiritual truth. They'll create elaborate spiritual hierarchies where they occupy the top position and you remain perpetually in student mode, always needing more teachings, more initiations, more purification before you can access your own direct connection to divine intelligence. They'll discourage you from trusting your own inner knowing, your own intuitive guidance, your own capacity to receive truth directly from source. The false teacher keeps you focused on your wounds, your karma, your need for healing, rather than your inherent wholeness, your infinite potential, your already perfect connection to universal consciousness. They profit from your sense of spiritual inadequacy, your belief that you need someone else to interpret reality for you, your fear of claiming your own divine authority. Now that you understand these 5 types of spiritual saboteurs, you might be recognizing people in your life who fit these patterns. You might be feeling a mix of clarity and sadness, relief and grief, anger and compassion. This is natural. This is part of the awakening process. You're seeing clearly, for perhaps the first time, how your energy has been compromised, how your expansion has been limited, how your authentic self has been suppressed. But here's what's crucial to understand. The moment you recognize these patterns, you reclaim your power. The moment you see clearly how these dynamics have been operating in your life, you can begin to make different choices. The moment you understand how energy works, how frequency operates, how consciousness creates reality, you can start protecting and directing your life force with precision and purpose. Some of these people may be family members, longtime friends, romantic partners, spiritual teachers you've trusted with your deepest vulnerabilities. The recognition that they've been sabotaging your growth, even unconsciously, can feel like a betrayal, a loss, a death of the relationship as you've known it. This is where most people get stuck. They recognize the pattern but feel too guilty, too loyal, too afraid of being alone to make the necessary changes. They convince themselves that they can somehow transform these relationships through love, patience, understanding. They believe they can maintain their spiritual expansion while continuing to expose themselves to frequencies that contradict their growth. But this is spiritual bypassing at its most subtle and dangerous level. True compassion sometimes requires creating distance. Real love sometimes means saying no. Authentic spiritual practice sometimes demands choosing your evolution over other people's comfort with your limitation. The universe is preparing to support you in ways you cannot imagine, but first you must create space for that support to enter your life. You must clear the energetic channels that have been clogged with the debris of relationships that no longer serve your highest good. You must become ruthless about protecting the frequency you're cultivating, the vision you're manifesting, the version of yourself that's emerging. This doesn't mean you have to cut everyone out of your life dramatically or burn bridges unnecessarily. But it does mean you need to establish clear energetic boundaries, limit your exposure to frequency patterns that diminish your life force, and prioritize relationships that support your expansion rather than constrain it. Some relationships may transform as you change your energetic stance. When you stop being available for drama, the misery lover may find their own path to joy. When you stop feeding the energy vampire's neediness, they may develop their own inner resources. When you refuse to shrink to make the comfort zone guardian comfortable, they may find their own courage to grow. But some relationships may end, and this too is part of your spiritual evolution. Not every person is meant to accompany you on every stage of your journey. Some souls serve their purpose in your life by showing you what you don't want, by reflecting back your own patterns of limitation, by giving you opportunities to practice boundaries and self-love. The people who belong in your expanded reality will recognize and celebrate your growth. They'll support your dreams, not because they understand them, but because they love seeing you come alive. They'll encourage your risks, not because they're fearless, but because they trust your ability to handle whatever outcomes emerge. They'll celebrate your successes, not because they benefit from them, but because your joy brings them genuine happiness. These are your true spiritual allies, your energetic matches, your fellow travelers on the path of conscious evolution. They may not be the people you expected, they may not be the relationships you've always had, but they are the connections your soul is calling toward as you step into your authentic power. You're about to discover something that will fundamentally alter how you navigate every relationship in your life. Because now that you can identify these 5 types of spiritual saboteurs, the real question becomes, how do you extract yourself from these energetic entanglements without destroying your entire social reality? Most people, when they first recognize these patterns, make one of 2 critical mistakes. Either they immediately cut everyone out of their life in a dramatic purge that leaves them isolated and questioning their sanity, or they do nothing at all, hoping that somehow the awareness alone will magically transform these toxic dynamics. Neither approach works. Both lead to either loneliness or continued energetic drain. There's a third path, a more sophisticated approach that allows you to reclaim your power while maintaining your integrity and compassion. The first step in this process is what I call frequency fortification. Before you can effectively navigate these relationships differently, you need to strengthen your own energetic field to the point where external influences can't penetrate your core frequency. Think of it like developing spiritual immunity. Most people are energetically porous. They absorb whatever frequency is dominant in their environment like a sponge soaking up water. If they're around negativity, they become negative. If they're surrounded by limitation, they start thinking small. If they're exposed to drama, they get pulled into chaos. But when you learn to generate and maintain your own coherent frequency, something extraordinary happens. You become what quantum physicists call a coherent emitter. Instead of being influenced by the energy around you, you begin to influence the energy around you. This isn't about becoming cold or detached. It's about becoming so anchored in your own truth, so connected to your own source of power, so clear about your own direction, that external turbulence can't knock what I call energy off course. You develop etic sovereignty. Here's how this works practically. Every morning, before you check your phone, before you engage with anyone else's energy, you spend time connecting with your own frequency. Not just meditation though, that can be part of it. I'm talking about conscious frequency calibration. You remind yourself of your vision, your purpose, your commitment to growth and expansion. You feel into the version of yourself you're becoming. You anchor yourself in the knowing that you are divine consciousness, having a human experience, not a human struggling to find consciousness. When you do this consistently, something shifts in how others respond to you. The misery lover finds it harder to pull you into their drama because you're not available for that frequency. The energy vampire discovers that you're no longer a reliable source of life force because you've learned to generate your own. The reality checker's limitations bounce off you like arrows hitting armor. But here's what's truly fascinating. As you strengthen your own frequency, you begin to see these people more clearly. Not as enemies or obstacles, but as souls trapped in patterns that no longer serve them, operating from wounds that keep them locked in cycles of limitation and pain. This clarity allows you to respond rather than react. When the reality checker starts listing all the reasons your dream won't work, instead of feeling deflated or getting defensive, you can simply say, "I appreciate your concern, and I'm choosing to focus on possibilities rather than limitations." Your energy doesn't waver because you're not seeking their approval or validation. When the misery lover calls with their latest crisis, instead of dropping everything to rescue them, you can offer compassion without taking on their suffering. "I hear that you're struggling, and I trust that you have everything within you to navigate this situation. Mektiku, you maintain love without losing yourself." The second phase of this transformation is what I call conscious communication. This is where you begin to speak truth without apology, to express your authentic self without seeking permission, to share your vision without needing others to understand or approve. Most people communicate from a place of seeking validation, trying to convince others that their dreams are valid, their choices are right, their path is worthwhile. This immediately puts you in a position of weakness because you're making your internal stability dependent on external approval. Conscious communication operates from a completely different premise. You're not trying to convince anyone of anything. You're simply expressing your truth, sharing your reality, living your authentic self out loud. Whether others understand or approve becomes irrelevant because you're not seeking their permission to be who you are. This shift in communication style is often the first thing that triggers resistance from the spiritual saboteurs in your life. They're used to your old patterns of seeking approval, needing validation, doubting yourself when they express concern or disapproval. When you start speaking with quiet confidence about your path, when you stop explaining or defending your choices, when you begin to embody the energy of someone who knows their own worth and direction, it disrupts the entire dynamic of these relationships. Some people will respond with increased attempts to pull you back into old patterns. The comfort zone guardian might escalate their warnings about the risks you're taking. The false teacher might question your spiritual maturity or suggest you're becoming arrogant. The energy vampire might create bigger crises to recapture your attention. This is what I call the extinction burst. It's a psychological phenomenon where unwanted behaviors temporarily increase in intensity right before they disappear completely. When someone realizes their old methods of influencing you are no longer working, they often try harder before they give up. Understanding this pattern is crucial because it's often the point where people cave in and revert to their old ways of relating. They interpret the increased pressure as evidence that they're doing something wrong, that they're hurting people they care about, that maybe they should go back to being more accommodating and less assertive. But this is exactly the moment when you need to hold your ground most firmly. The extinction burst is actually proof that your new approach is working. It means you're successfully disrupting patterns that no longer serve anyone involved. The third phase is strategic distance. This doesn't necessarily mean cutting people out of your life completely, though sometimes that becomes necessary. It means consciously managing your exposure to frequencies that drain or diminish your life force. You might limit the time you spend with certain people or change the context in which you interact with them. Maybe you stop having deep personal conversations with the reality checker and keep your interactions light and surface level. Perhaps you set specific boundaries with the energy vampire about when and how often they can contact you. Strategic distance also means being selective about what you share with whom. Not everyone deserves access to your dreams, your struggles, your vulnerable moments. You become more discerning about which relationships can hold space for your authentic self, and which ones require you to perform a more limited version of yourself. This isn't about being fake or dishonest. It's about recognizing that different relationships serve different purposes, and not every connection needs to operate at the same level of depth and intimacy. You can love someone and still protect your energy from them. You can care about someone's well-being without making their emotional state your responsibility. Some of the people in your life may surprise you during this process. As you change your energetic stance, as you stop enabling their patterns of limitation, as you model a different way of being, some of them may begin to transform as well. The misery lover might discover that they can actually handle their without constant own problems, external support. The comfort zone guardian might find their own courage to take risks when they see you thriving despite their warnings. Even the energy vampire might start developing their own inner resources when their usual sources of external energy are no longer available. But others may not be ready for this level of growth. They may prefer to maintain their familiar patterns, even if those patterns keep them stuck in limitation and suffering. And this is where your commitment to your own evolution is tested most severely. You'll face moments where you have to choose between your growth and someone else's comfort, between your truth and someone else's version of reality, between your expansion for you and someone else's need to remain small and manageable. These are the moments that separate those who transform from those who remain trapped. These are the crossroads where you decide whether you'll live your authentic life or spend your precious existence managing other people's resistance to your greatness. The fourth phase is what I call magnetic alignment. As you clear your energetic field of relationships that drain your life force, you create space for connections that actually support and amplify your expansion. Like attracts like in the energetic realm, and as you embody higher frequencies, you naturally magnetize others who operate from similar levels of consciousness. These new relationships feel different from the beginning. Instead of leaving you feeling depleted, conversations energize and inspire you. Instead of questioning your dreams, these people celebrate your vision and may even contribute ideas that help you expand it further. Instead of focusing on what could go wrong, they help you see possibilities you hadn't considered. You'll find yourself surrounded by what I call frequency matches. People whose energy naturally harmonizes with yours, who support your growth without needing to understand every detail of your journey, who trust your ability to navigate your own path, even when it leads through unknown territory. But here's something crucial that most people don't understand about this process. The new relationships that emerge won't necessarily be with people who are exactly like you or who are at the same stage of development. What matters is energetic compatibility, not circumstantial similarity. You might connect deeply with someone who's just beginning their spiritual journey, but who has an open heart and a willingness to grow. You might find profound alignment with someone whose life path looks completely different from yours, but who operates from the same core frequencies of authenticity, courage, and expansion. The key is that these relationships are based on mutual inspiration rather than mutual dependency, on shared growth rather than shared limitation, on celebrating each other's authentic expression rather than trying to control or constrain it. This is when your life begins to feel truly magical, when you're surrounded by people who see your potential and reflect it back to you, who believe in your dreams even when they don't fully understand them, who celebrate your successes as genuinely as their own. But perhaps the most profound shift happens within your relationship with yourself. As you stop seeking external validation and start generating your own sense of worth, as you learn to trust your inner guidance, more than ever you develop the people's opinions, as courage to live authentically, regardless of who approves or disapproves, you discover something extraordinary. You realize that you are never actually dependent on those draining relationships for your sense of connection or belonging. You are settling for energetic scraps when you could have been feasting at the banquet of authentic relationship. You are accepting limitation as love, when true love always supports expansion. The people who belong in your life will make themselves known through their response to your authentic self. They won't try to change you, fix you, or save you from your own choices. They'll simply love who you are and who you're becoming, trusting that you know your own path better than anyone else possibly could. This transformation isn't always smooth or immediate. There will be moments when doubt creeps in, when the familiar pull of old patterns feels stronger than your commitment to growth. You'll question whether you're being too harsh, too selfish, too demanding in your new standards for relationships. Your old conditioning will whisper seductive lies. Maybe you're expecting too much from people. Maybe you should be more understanding of their limitations. Maybe spiritual growth means accepting everyone exactly as they are, never setting boundaries, never saying no to anyone who claims to need your help. But here's the truth that will liberate you from these guilt-inducing thoughts. Accepting people as they are doesn't mean accepting treatment that diminishes your life force. Loving someone unconditionally doesn't mean providing unlimited access to your energy. Compassion doesn't require you to sacrifice your own well-being on the altar of other people's unhealed patterns. In fact, the most loving thing you can do for someone trapped in limitation is to stop enabling their patterns by refusing to participate in dynamics that keep both of you stuck. When you stop being available for drama, you force the dramatic person to find new ways of getting their needs met. When you stop rescuing someone from the consequences of their choices, you create space for them to develop their own problem-solving abilities. This is what I call loving disruption. You disrupt patterns that don't serve anyone involved, not from a place of anger or punishment, but from a place of deep knowing that everyone deserves to experience their highest potential. Sometimes love looks like walking away. Sometimes compassion requires creating distance. Sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is prioritize your own growth over someone else's comfort with your limitation. The people who truly love you will understand this even if it takes time. They may initially feel confused or hurt by your new boundaries, but if there's genuine care beneath the surface, they'll eventually recognize that you're becoming more authentic, more alive, more connected to your own power. They'll see that your growth isn't a rejection of them, but a gift to yourself that ultimately benefits everyone in your orbit. But some people will never understand, and this is where your spiritual maturity is truly tested. Can you maintain love in your heart for someone while simultaneously protecting yourself from their energy? Can you wish someone well while refusing to participate in patterns that drain your life force? Can you hold compassion for their struggle while not making their healing your responsibility? These are advanced spiritual skills that most people never develop because they're never taught the difference between enabling and supporting, between accommodating and loving, between being available and being codependent. They confuse spiritual growth with endless tolerance, enlightenment with doormat behavior, unconditional love with unlimited access. True spiritual maturity recognizes that your energy is sacred, your dreams are valid, your growth is not negotiable. It understands that you serve no one by dimming your light, compromising your vision, or settling for relationships that require you to be less than who you authentically are. As you embody this understanding more fully, you'll notice something remarkable happening in your external reality. Opportunities that were previously invisible become obvious. Resources that seemed unavailable suddenly appear. People who can genuinely support your vision show up in your life through what seems like coincidence, but is actually the natural result of energetic alignment. This is because the energy you are unconsciously investing in managing difficult relationships, tolerating energy drains, and trying to convince people to support your dreams is now available for creating actual results. The mental bandwidth you were using to process drama, analyze other people's problems, and second-guess your own choices is now directed toward manifesting your authentic desires. You discover that you have far more creative power than you ever imagined when that power isn't being leaked through energetic cracks in your relational foundation. You realize that your dreams weren't unrealistic, your goals weren't impossible, your vision wasn't too big. You were simply trying to manifest from a compromised energetic state, surrounded by people whose frequency contradicted your intentions. The universe responds to coherence, to clarity, to the unwavering signal of someone who knows their worth and refuses to accept anything less than alignment with their highest truth. When you stop broadcasting mixed messages through your relationships, when you stop tolerating treatment that contradicts your value, when you surround yourself only with energies that support your expansion, manifestation becomes natural rather than forced. This is when you understand that protecting your energy isn't selfish, it's essential. Choosing relationships that support your growth isn't shallow, it's sacred. Refusing to shrink yourself to fit into other people's limited version of what's possible isn't arrogant, it's authentic. You begin to see that every spiritual teacher throughout history who made a significant impact had to make these same difficult choices. They had to disappoint people who wanted them to stay small. They had to walk away from relationships that couldn't hold space for their expanded consciousness. They had to choose their mission over the comfort of those who preferred their previous, more manageable version. Buddha left his palace and family to seek enlightenment. Jesus walked away from conventional expectations to fulfill his purpose. Every revolutionary, every innovator, every person who contributed something meaningful to human evolution had to release relationships that couldn't support their authentic expression. This doesn't mean you become cold or disconnected from others. In fact, the opposite happens. As you learn to protect your energy from draining influences, you have more genuine love and compassion available for relationships that deserve your investment. As you stop trying to fix or save people who aren't ready for transformation, you can offer authentic support to those who are genuinely committed to their own growth. You become more present in conversations because you're not constantly managing someone else's emotional state. You offer clearer guidance because you're not filtering your truth through fear of how others might react. You love more freely because you're not protecting yourself from people who mistake your kindness for weakness or your openness for availability to be drained. The relationships that remain in your life after this process of energetic refinement become deeper, more nourishing, more mutually supportive than anything you experienced before. These people see you, celebrate you, challenge you to grow even further rather than trying to keep you comfortable in limitation. They don't need you to be perfect, but they also don't try to convince you that your imperfections mean you should abandon your dreams. They support your healing without making your wounds your identity. They believe in your potential even when you're struggling to access it yourself. This is what healthy relationship actually looks like, and most people have never experienced it because they've never created the energetic conditions that make it possible. They've been so focused on being understanding, accommodating, and available to everyone that they've never discovered what becomes available when you're selective, boundaried, and intentional about who gets access to your energy. The people who are meant to journey with you into higher levels of consciousness will make themselves known through their response to your authentic self. They won't need you to dim your light so they feel comfortable. They won't require you to move slowly so they don't feel left behind. They won't ask you to explain or justify your growth as if expansion requires permission. Instead, they'll be curious about your journey without needing to control it. They'll be inspired by your courage without feeling threatened by your success. They'll celebrate your wins without comparing them to their own progress. They'll offer support without creating dependency. They'll provide perspective without imposing their limitations. These are your true spiritual family, the souls who recognize your essence and want to see you embody it fully. They may not be the people you grew up with, the family you were born into, or the friends you've had the longest. Soul recognition transcends history, biology, and circumstance. You'll know them by how you feel in their presence, energized rather than drained, inspired rather than diminished, seen rather than judged, supported rather than sabotaged. These relationships feel like coming home to yourself, rather than having to perform a version of yourself that others find acceptable. But here's what's most important to understand as you navigate this transformation. The process of releasing spiritual saboteurs and attracting authentic allies isn't a one-time event. It's an ongoing practice of energetic discernment, a continuous refinement of your relational standards, a lifelong commitment to protecting and honoring your sacred energy. As you evolve, your energetic needs change. People who once supported your growth may no longer be able to match your expanding frequency. New challenges require new levels of support. Deeper healing work may reveal patterns you weren't previously conscious enough to recognize. This means staying alert, staying discerning, staying committed to your own energetic sovereignty, even when it's inconvenient or uncomfortable. It means being willing to outgrow relationships that served you at one stage of development, but no longer align with who you're becoming. Most people resist this natural evolution of relationship because they mistake familiarity for loyalty, history for obligation. They stay in connections that no longer nourish them because they feel guilty about growing beyond the people who knew them when they were smaller, more limited, more willing to accept less than they deserved. But your spiritual evolution is not a betrayal of your past self or the people who knew that version of you. It's a fulfillment of your soul's purpose, an honoring of the divine spark within you that refuses to be contained by other people's fear of their own potential. The spiritual saboteurs in your life are actually serving a sacred purpose, though they don't realize it. They're showing you exactly what you're ready to release, teaching you how to recognize energy that doesn't serve your highest good, forcing you to develop the spiritual muscles required to protect your authentic self. Every time you choose your growth over their comfort with your limitation, you become stronger. Every time you maintain your vision, despite their doubts, you develop unshakable faith in your own knowing. Every time you protect your energy from their drain, you learn to value yourself at the level your soul recognizes as true. They're your teachers in disguise, your spiritual trainers helping you develop the discernment, boundaries, and energetic sovereignty required to fulfill you, learn your highest purpose. Once the lessons they came to teach, once you develop the skills they forced you to cultivate, their role in your life naturally completes itself. Some of them may transform as you transform, rising to meet your new energetic standards and discovering their own capacity for growth in the process. Others will fade from your experience as you vibrate out of their frequency range. Both outcomes serve your evolution and theirs, even if they can't see it from their current level of consciousness. The key is recognizing that this process is divinely orchestrated for your highest good and the highest good of everyone involved. Trust the intelligence that brought these relationships into your life, and trust the same intelligence that's now guiding you to refine, transform, or release them as needed. The choice is yours, and it always has been. You can continue allowing these 5 types of spiritual saboteurs to drain your energy, diminish your dreams, and keep you trapped in cycles of limitation that serve no one. Or you can choose this moment as your liberation point, the instant when you reclaim your power and step into the frequency of your authentic self. Your soul knows which path leads to expansion and which leads to stagnation. Trust that knowing, protect that energy, and watch as your reality reorganizes itself around the truth of who you really are. The universe is waiting,